Hey, welcome back to the Arbitrage.Run show. It's your host, Donkey Teeth here. Let me waste no time in bringing on the star of the show, Kevin from Arbitrage. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Donkey. How you doing, man?
Good. How's your week going?
Pretty good. ZED keeping me busy. So that's always nice.
Yeah, so, we got the 6 horse races popping off this week. It's pretty exciting stuff, huh?
Yeah, I still call them top 6 every single time. So hopefully this is the show. I break that habit. If I've run enough of them, I should know by now. But it's fun. It's something new.
I think Zed is trying to make it as confusing as possible for us with top 6, all 12, 6 horse races.
Yeah, progression now at least. That's good.
So we're going to get into a little bit of strategy talk on the 6 horse races and talk a little bit about flames because, you kind of identified it like right away. The flames are going to be wacky in these things. And we've seen some interesting stuff already. But before we do dive in there, we just wanted to congratulate all of the winners from the Arbitrage.Run Cup that ran, I think it was last weekend over in the UK. We sponsored that event and we bred 12 different horses as prizes for it. So there were a bunch of winners from that. And then there was actually Zombie Joe from Zombie Racing won 2 horses in it because, he's a beast. And he decided that he was going to give one back. So that is now being used as a prize for the Donkey Derby that was just announced by Zed. So, we didn't actually do anything to sponsor that, but they're kind enough to kind of give us a sponsorship. So we've got a prize there from Arbitrage.Run as well. Congrats to everybody. Good luck in the Donkey Derby. Oh, the other thing before we get into the 6 horse races. So a bunch of people, Kevin, they've been asking me about they reach out and ask if we've got any horses like available to breed right now. So I just wanted to show real quick on Arbitrage.Run, you can actually filter by available now, which would be helpful. Let me just share the screen. So over here on the left side, you can filter by available now. And then you can, up there, that worked now. So you can see there's available breeds here, and it shows if these cycles are taken. So there's 1 slot left here for Luria Overcast this cycle. So if you're searching for something, instead of having to reach out to us, you can really filter through a lot of stuff right here. And if you find a horse that's about to reset, we'll probably give it to you really cheap if you want to breed with it, because we might not be using it this cycle anyway. So just wanted to bring that up real quick before we dive in on the strategy stuff, because a lot of people are reaching out to us about that, and it'll save us all some time. So Kevin, let's talk about the 6 horse races, what everybody came for, the master's advice on how to approach these, what everything means. What's your experience so far running in these 6 horse races?
And we are running ice cold right now, which is probably music to a lot of people's ears. But some horses I thought would be crushing, and I still think they'll turn it around. Like Third Head has had a rough start, kind of bringing the pity point field back, right, with these 4th places being a pretty big swing. But no, they're a lot of fun. I think typically it's going to reward those horses that have more stability, along with rewarding some of the upside horses as well, because the payout structure is very similar in terms of percent of the pot going to 1st, 2nd, 3rd as the 12 horse races. But they're a lot of fun. I knew there'd be some weird things going on with flames, just because by nature now you have half of the horses in the field getting flames. It's a lower bar to hit top 3, and it's a higher bar in terms of percent podium rate for horses to hit. So your U-shapers are just never going to flame in these top 6s. Or I can tell 6 horses.
Hey, you called it from the start, so you can do that.
That's right.
So we've got some examples here that you wanted me to pull up, right?
Yeah. We'll start with, I think one that on the surface is pretty surprising, with Ready, Set, Boom running a 2600 in what was a top-heavy field, I'll call it. The kind of the kings and queens of marathon were in this one, with Breathless, Artois, Grandeur, and then 2 who didn't have too much of a shot, but they were just enjoying running $100 against some great horses. And with this one, I think ZSim does a really good job illustrating what I'm talking about with that bar being higher in terms of podium rate to get the flames. So on this one, you pretty much have 4 horses who have all of the podium rate. And I'm looking at the in the money column in the middle. And ZSim nailed this one with Breathless, Artois, and Grandeur hitting the flames. Race at Boom, basically in the same tier. Like, there's not much of a difference between a 67.5% top 3 rate and a 68.4 or even a 71%. But what's interesting, and something I wanted to kind of check because I would have thought this as well, was Race at Boom still has the highest win share, coming in at 28.1%. And ROI wise, even though it's not quite as top heavy as it would be in a 12 horse race, it's still the best ROI in the race in spite of not flaming. So something to just keep an eye on. RSB is not the only example of this happening. It happens a lot when you see horses with really good speeds. So you see that 1015.8 is pretty much in line with those other 3 horses. But the reason RSB isn't flaming is because the variance of 7.6 is just a little bit higher than those others. And that's all it takes when you're having to podium 70% of the time to get flames. That little bit of variance is going to help you on the win side, as you see, but it's going to hurt you getting flames. So just doing your research. I like doing ZSim because I think it shows base speed and variance super well as projecting ROI. So I've lived on this site with the 6 horse races coming. There's a really good resource.
And I think it's also important to note, like we really need to be able to separate out these 6 horse races versus traditional races. These newer horses that may have just come through the Maiden, people can kind of manipulate the flames on some of these horses to make them look better than they are and potentially take advantage of new players, price some horses up. If you don't know what it actually means and what you're looking at, then I mean, we're all still kind of trying to figure out what it all really means. I think you've got it figured out pretty well, but having it on like a site like Know Your Horses and Haku, where you can filter by just the 6 horse races, would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think they mentioned they're going to build that out, but right now it's just a 3 or 4 day test, so they're going to wait until it comes back on more mainstream to actually show it. But I agree. I think they should flag it or just remove them entirely if you can't flag it right now, because they're gonna you're gonna reach some different conclusions, especially on young horses who only ran 6 horse races.
Right. So you want me to pull up this other example, Kevin?
Yeah, I think the example of U horses just rarely flaming. Diamonds is our best true U horse. And this is an example where obviously the win share is there. Diamonds ran, this is a real race, a 1600, where it had the best odds, some positive ROI, but Diamonds self-tanks almost half the time. So no matter what the field is, Diamonds is not going to be in the money more than 50% of the time. And when there's only 3 of 12 horses podiuming, you can flame with like a 40% podium rate. But when the average podium rate in the field is 50%, Diamonds is not going to flame in many of these. So this is just another example illustrating that the monster variance number of 11.7 and the win share leading the pack, ROI leading the pack, but 49.9% ain't going to cut it in these 6 horse fields.
So you're not hesitant to enter a horse like Diamonds in any stakes in a 6 horse race still, even though, you know.
That's a good question. I am definitely more hesitant than if it were a 12. I think if you ran a similar field and just doubled it, Diamonds is going to outvariance everybody. The win share will drop some. It might be 15%, but you get a lot more for winning from an ROI perspective. So that ROI number is probably closer to 50% in a full field. Whereas if it's just 6 horse race, it's only 20%. So it's still a yes, like I would still enter, but it makes you think a little more, especially when you hit those cold streaks.
Yeah, makes sense. Anything else you want to hit here on the 6 horse races?
No, I think they're fun. There's a lot they can do with it. I look forward to seeing the next iteration, even though they're about to, I think, turn them off in a day or two. It's going to be fun. They could do whole tournaments of 6 horse races. They could have a bigger bracket because you only have half as many in the races. I think it's done great things for the amount of races that can go off because you just don't need as many horses to fill a race. So it's been fun. Hope they bring it back, and I hope they bring it back with, among other things, so it's just like one of the options we can have.
I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to be here to stay, just because of how fast they're popping off. Everybody seems to love them. I mean, it's just and anything that gets people more engaged with the platform and people having more fun, more stuff to do is great. So I can't see any way that you go back now.
Agreed.
All right, let's take a couple of questions from Twitter here. We had some great questions on Twitter this week. It was hard to narrow it down. Thanks for all your questions, guys. This first one here, though, is coming from Cadet Racing. And actually, I think Archibald asked a very similar question. So both of them had this question about the strategy behind running two horses in a high stakes race versus running them separately. How do you approach this when you're making this decision, Kevin? How do you know if it's going to be more advantageous to run them together in one race or to split them out?
I think when there's more variety of races and races are popping off and fatigue actually matters, it's better to cast a wider net because you do cannibalize each other a little bit from an ROI perspective. But with the current state of things, especially at the high end for some of our best horses, I think we can put out some horses that are at the top in terms of expected ROI to where it doesn't hurt too much. They don't cannibalize each other too much, especially when we have like an RSB type where it's more consistent, and pairing that with like an Evergreen Gates who is going to have an amazing run 25, 30% of the time, but the other 70%, it's not really going to be a factor and not going to do anything to RSB. If a high dollar race pops, I don't mind throwing both of them in there at all because I know they'll be near the top. And not to Z-sim you to death this episode, but I think it does such a good job on showing this and illustrating it. This is an example of a race where we ran a 2200, I think it was 3 or 4 days ago, and it was a $25 race. And we actually ran 3 in this one. We had RSB, Supreme, and Evergreen Gates. And you can see, I mean, they're all squarely in the positive ROI. And once again, if you took one of them out or both of them out and just left RSB, the ROI probably goes up to like 80%. But if you're thinking about like adding up the ROI, this is actually optimal to do as long as there's not an opportunity cost of a race I'm missing because I'm burning this stamina. So as long as I have something that's in the green and it's not cannibalizing too hard, I have no problems entering 2 or even 3 in a race.
And you kind of hit on something there that it actually proves a point that you've been driving home for a while, that we really need to test, lowering fatigue so that monster horses like Ready, Set, Boom get fatigued after 6 races, and then you might not be doing something like this, if there is that kind of opportunity cost and,
right.
and everybody's going to be exhausted.
Absolutely. I mean, like the prime example there is even when we didn't lower fatigue, but when it was a C1 Premier and those races were popping off in Class 1, I would never do anything like this. A, because it's going to hurt the standings for the C1 Premier, and B, you're going to be able to have the same race popping 30 minutes later without cannibalizing each other. So great point.
Yeah. So we want to look at the example that Cadet had asked about in his question, his 2 horses, Blood Duchess and Immortal Duchess, right?
Yeah. All right. So let's see let's go ahead and run it at 1,000 and we'll see what the ROI was for Blood Duchess. Strong as you would expect, 78.6. Now we'll take out like GM Wagme, an average horse from that race, and we'll replace it with Immortal. And what we want to see is how much does adding Immortal over someone else who may have joined, how much does that hurt Blood Duchess? And then how much is it positive ROI for Immortal Duchess to also be in there with Blood Duchess, because that's a beast taking ROI away. And it looks, I mean, Immortals still can hold their own for sure, coming at 7.3%. But like, what's the point? You're taking a little bit away from Blood Duchess and not really gaining anything for Immortal. So it could be fun. You're probably not costing yourself money doing that. But another option would be, instead of entering Blood Duchess there, what if you just entered Immortal? So we can do the same thing. We can edit, take out Blood Duchess, add back in GM Wagme, and see what that goes up to. Because we had a 7% ROI for Immortal. I bet it's higher now. Now you're up to 12. So marginal, but it's still an improvement. So you could also just have Immortal. But to answer your question in short, after this long journey to get to that point, I would think Immortal can hold its own in low dollar C1s, but I wouldn't overlap them too much, at least in that example.
Well, now everybody knows how to use eSIM, so
Yeah, nice tutorial there.
Okay, so yeah, I think you hit on that question pretty well, Kevin. We appreciate it. Next question here is coming from Scuderia Epic, and he wants to know. So a little bit of translation here on what I think he means by this question here. I believe that I said on a previous show that I'm speculating that the grandparent role is much more common than a lot of people believe. I think a lot of people think it's maybe like 20% of the time you pull grandparent, maybe 30. I think it might be as much as 60 to 70, 75%. And just sometimes you get like a very small dose and it's not even noticeable. So I think his question here is regarding that. If that's the case, and you've got a really well-bred elite, all 2.0 down the line coming from monster parents with that alignment going on, would it be just as worthy to breed with that elite versus breeding with a legendary that comes from good parents, or is that going to be not as effective? So I'll take the first crack at this one, Kevin, and then we'll kick it over to you for your input. But let me take this off the screen. I think there's a lot that we still don't know, as far as like, is there some sort of degradation when you get down in breed type down to elite? But you and I have been talking about this, that we think elites and exclusives like that are bred down really well from these great bloodlines just can continue to stack and stack perfect distance preference from the best horses in the game are super undervalued. And once you're able to get down into the cross and even pacer level, those kind of horses are just going to absolutely crush these other crosses and pacers that may not have bred so strategically and so meticulously all the way down the line. So I think there is something to that. And especially when you look at some of these legendaries that people are putting into stud at, 0.5 ETH or, even up close to 1 ETH, and you can get an elite that people have this aversion to breeding with elite studs because you're going to get across and you might be able to sneak it through for 0.15 ETH or 0.2. I definitely think that there's something to that, but there's a lot of unknown. And I think the other thing I want to say before I kick it over to you, Kevin, is it also depends on what you're doing with your stable. Are you looking at trying to build a bloodline from the exclusive level where you can now not kick out all of these elites and then breed that down into your own crosses and have your own bloodline like that versus just, breeding across right there. So there's something to that. Having that bloodline higher up gives you more options. So there's some value in that, but again, a lot of unknown here, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to find that like pure elite that has that perfect lineage coming all the way down. It's easier to have a legendary because you have the Genesis that's easy to pick, and then you need to hit on one, and then you have a really good legendary. For like the perfect elite that we kind of are keeping our eye out for and always trying to breed is you have to hit the whole way down. So that way, when you're breeding with that horse, there's really nowhere it can go wrong as long as you get a good positive roll with it. So I think in that instance, like that kind of elite could even be more valuable than that kind of legendary. And if you're talking about breeding with it, those breeds are much more limited. So by that definition, like it should almost cost more because your supply is lower. So I think he's definitely onto something here. You need to be careful because there's just not that many perfectly bred elites yet. But I think as this game grows and as we have more and more cycles of 2.0, that truly is like the vision of creating these pacers that just dominate.
And, I think a lot of people have identified this opportunity to breed for segmentation into the cross and pacer level. And by nature, as more and more people identify that and breed towards it, there's going to be less of an edge there. So yeah, there may still be a little bit of an edge in breeding for these conditionals, but you're at the mercy of ZED with a lot of stuff. Are they going to come out with? Are they going to continue to put out these Z268 conditionals every week or every other week? We don't know what it's going to look like and where the opportunity is. So, just be aware of that if you're pumping all of your budget into that kind of stuff. not financial advice, but they can always pull the rug on that type of stuff too. So, Kevin, I think we're going to skip over our buddy Jack. We've gone over his questions like every week, and he did have the most liked question. We were going to hit on it, but we're pretty deep into the show already. So maybe if you ask that question about creation of mortals again, Jack, maybe we'll hit on it next week. A couple of quick questions, though, we can hit on very quick before we get into a couple of other things. So Brood Boy Stables is asking, when you've got a horse, Kevin, that has the ability to win across all different distance funnels, and I guess theoretically probably flaming across all these distances, is it safe to breed that horse for any distance? What are your thoughts here on this?
I think the horse he's describing is almost certainly one that doesn't have distance preference. If it's flaming on both ends, it's either insanely good base ability or just it's squarely in that 1800 camp. So I personally would not try to breed this type of horse with an extreme sprinter or an extreme marathoner. But if you're catching a horse that's like a 1400 horse or a 2000, and you think this one has really good base ability or really good variance, whatever makes it a successful mid, then you could try some things out. I just personally wouldn't go and try to breed a marathoner with a horse that has no distance preference.
Right. I mean, you can. You're just probably going to get a 2000 horse, and there's more value in breeding that out for marathon at this stage in the game, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's the key to this question, is that if it's flaming everywhere, it's very likely a mid with very little distance preference, which Kevin taught me very early on. It's just not intuitive. Like that, if you're flaming in a marathon and at a sprint, then your horse either has crazy base ability or it's a mid.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question here, Kevin. Okay, so Artisan Stables, we talked about his horse dot matrix when we were discussing examples of horses with bad breeding talent. So I feel obligated that we come back around, because we don't want to bash on anybody's horse. And it is still really early in the game to be saying for sure a horse has bad breeding talent too. You know, we don't have a huge sample yet. It hasn't produced anything great. But Artisan is asking, is there something that can be done here to improve the breeding, or is he forever going to be a terrible breeder? You know, I think there's still a lot that we don't know. You know, there might be a pairing that dot matrix hasn't had yet that he just kind of clicks with him. And I think that could be said for any horses. And the other thing I want to say, Kevin, is we don't know what breeding is going to look like in 12 months. They're going to tweak breeding. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So I wouldn't overreact to, you know, whatever 4 months of bad breeding with a horse that, you know, has some nice traits in it. You know, dot matrix has some distance preference, very consistent, stable runner. So I think theoretically down the line, things should look different for a horse like dot matrix. We just don't know what that is, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it's so early. And I refuse to believe a horse that's that good under 2.0, as it currently stands at least, will not be capable of producing anything of value. I think it might just be a lower hit rate if it does have low breeding ability or whatever we want to call it. But I think there's still hope, and I think it's early. It's just hasn't hit anything yet.
Okay, Kevin, let's talk about, there's going to be a lot of keeping it real on this show. And that was the title that I had penciled out for this. So we want to talk about a couple of breeding successes, and we're probably going to go a little bit long here, Kevin, but the first one's name is Newton's Abomination. And we actually bred this just yesterday. And I think the owner, let me share my screen here for you to kind of go over it. I think the owner has actually run it very recently, so we'll see how it's looking. It may have run it since we even last looked at it. Newton's Abomination is coming from the creation of mortals and Newton. So this was a build a breed request that we charged 1.5 Ethereum for. The Ethereum price this week is $1,680 or thereabouts. And the fee for this breed, Kevin, it was creation of mortals. We had penciled in for about 1 Ethereum stud fee, which is what we had run him through in stud last cycle. And Newton was about 0.5 Ethereum. So this horse is looking really good in the early going, a little bit more mid finishes here. It's now found its way up into class 1 and lost a couple. It looks like he's tanking it here. It lost its first flame at 1400 just a minute ago, it looks like. it lost to 1,000, but it's flaming in C1 freeze. It's a pretty interesting horse, huh, Kevin?
Yeah, it really is. I'll actually be curious to see if it has tankability or not, because I mean, it should be able to do some damage in class 2.
Yeah, got that 12.
Got the 12. So yeah, off to a good start there. Might see a little U form, but yeah, it definitely has the distance preference where you would think it can tank a little bit too.
So we wanted to hit on in this segment kind of a little bit more about current market conditions, because the market changes so fast. The stud market, the sales market, everything about Zed and crypto in general is so volatile and can change so fast. So, I mean, we're seeing it. And part of it, I think, could be because of the natural cycle of the Maiden ending. But things are slowing down big time as far as pricing in the stud, as far as how quickly studs are getting taken, sniping, all of that kind of stuff. So, if we were going to be booking this breed today, Kevin, I think we would do it at a lower price. We just ran Creation of Mortals yesterday through stud because we knew that people were going to be out of their premium mares right after the Maiden. We got them through at 0.8, and I actually had a little glitch in my breed, and it was like probably 30 seconds I had to snag that. So we might have even been able to go lower on that. I'm not even sure. But I think we'd probably sell this and book it for like 1.25, 1.3. At the same time, this one looks really good, so maybe we wouldn't be as willing to go lower. But I think it's worth addressing on this show every week where the market is going, what we're feeling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the timing of when you stud is so key for the premium ones at least, because while 0.8 or 0.75 might be a good price for this, if someone doesn't have that perfect premium match, they're going to pass. I mean, we get messages all the time after we breed ones like, man, I wish I had known you were putting them in because I just used my mare for that yesterday. So timing is key, as well as just like general market momentum, which I think you just highlighted.
Yeah, momentum is cooling, which could present opportunities. I'll say since we've started Arbitrage.Run, the past 72 hours has been definitely the lowest volume of requests that we've seen come through. So if you want to use that as a market indicator, there might just be some fatigue and exhaustion based on there's not a ton of momentum going on right now with changes in Zed. Yeah, we do have the 6-horse races, but there's some negative sentiment out there, and when that happens, it can present opportunities. So just another thought there. We don't have a whole lot going on, so we might be more willing to knock a breed out for you like immediately right now, right?
Yep, exactly.
Wait, Kevin, before we move on to the next one, this horse, Newton's Abomination, where would you be valuing that? I know it's still very early, but it has gotten into class 1 and it is flaming. It looks pretty promising still. And it was a colt. So it's a Z4 exclusive colt from these two parents. Where do you think that you would be buying this, and where would you be selling it?
I would probably be buying in that like low to mid ones range with that blood. And I don't love that it's a colt, but it's got good variance. You can see the tail coming on the sprints. It's got flames to go along with it. I'd be curious who it lost flames to at 1,000. That would impact the valuation. But if I had this horse, I probably wouldn't sell it for under 2 at least until I knew more. So those are some really steady horses. If you're looking at Razor Glass is one of the better Genesis Nakamoto sprinters. You have a horse that hasn't lost flames yet, and then you have another 97.2% flamer. So with this horse's variance, it could very easily be just right in that same tier as those. So yeah, I think low to mid ones is probably what it's worth on the buy side. I wouldn't sell it for under 2 just because I'd be so curious what its ceiling is.
Makes sense.
It's fun to breed.
Right. So the other one, we mentioned this last week that we were going to be doing this breed, Triumph for Terms with, actually, I don't know if we specifically, no, your horses is not cooperating again. Triumph for Saber. So it's Triumph for Terms with Saber It Out. And this was the elite that we were really excited to breed for the first time, Triumph for Terms. So it kicked out this cross, and it's going to be in the grand final, I'm fairly certain, for the Lucky Maiden. Just super stable cross here. And this is in class 1 already, that it's still flaming in class 1 freeze in the marathon distance. So just the only back end finish was in this absolutely loaded Maiden quarterfinal with like all of the best. There was two Z1s in this race.
Yep.
Came out pretty well.
Yeah, it looks awesome. It looks exactly what you would expect or hope by breeding those two horses. It's another one that's important to point out. Like, that shape looks a little A-shapey, but when you have that against horses that it actually should be racing, like other crosses, this thing is going to look really, really good.
What's your current value on this one as a buyer and seller, Kevin? I know this is really tough. It's a cross, just a very unique horse, right?
It's a colt as well. Colts down this far actually are interesting because I think people are realizing if you can sneak it in a stud, you can create another cross or even like a pacer if you want to for these conditionals. Specifically on the cross portion, you can throw a legendary knack at it and create a cross itself. So they're interesting to breed. This one, I mean, I would say probably around 1.2.5, something like that. I think you're banking a lot on conditionals remaining to be a thing, but maybe even more than that if you think about the breedability of it and talking about like there's 2.0 crosses that are just loaded the whole way up. This is getting pretty close to that, not having any holes in its lineage. So maybe a little higher than that. Maybe we're getting in the mid ones. I know you would probably have a higher number based on your valuation of breeding and your addiction, we'll call it, to breeding.
Yeah, I'd fight you on that one, but it's interesting to get your perspective for sure. Okay, we're going to move on to keeping it real here since we've gotten long, but there was one that I was going to highlight named Full Metal Insanity that is a cross as well, and it looks really good. And the fee that we charged for that one was 0.4 as a build to breed. So if you're curious and want to see another cross that came through us, Full Metal Insanity is the horse, and it's got some Evergreen Gates blood and Insane Hymn. Was a real fun one. But let's move on to keeping it real, Kevin. I wanted to start out here. Let me just put us back on screen so people can see your beautiful face. All right. So I wanted to talk about, we did 25 horses or so into the Lucky Maiden. We put a lot of horses in. And so I just wanted to address like where we ended up with those 25, because these were like 25 of our best breeds this cycle. We did sell a lot of our good breeds, but these were like the 25 best that were remaining. A lot of ones that we had a lot of hope for. And of those 25, well, 2 of them are in the top 10 right now for the Lucky Maiden overall. One of them is this Triumph for Sabre horse. But about 6 of those horses, I think you would call good horses with potential for paid racing at low stakes, whether that's actually in class 1 low stakes or if you can get them into class 2. But they should be profitable horses. And then another 10 of them you called useful for segmented racing. And then there was another 10 that were total duds. There might be some breeding value left because of the awesome blood that were in them, but there's not a whole lot of racing value in them, at least not in the current ecosystem, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've done these Lucky Maidens, 4 or 5 times now. Feels like this was our worst showing yet. We'll see how the grand finals go. We do have some bullets going into that, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good like analysis on what we have. I'd say 20% were hits, 40% were about what you would expect, and then 40% were pretty much duds.
So 20% hit rate, maybe, and we're talking about using like some of the best bloodlines in the game. So just for reference, there's, and then 50% of them are, almost worthless as racers coming from the best blood in the game. So we want to be transparent. This is not easy right now for us or anybody. It's tough going out there, and hopefully, when they fix the class system, which they're promising to do, and we have faith in it, this is going to be totally different. And some of these horses might have a place come that time, but right now we can only play the game that we've got in front of us, and it's tough. So we understand the frustration out there. Okay, Kevin, what do we have time for? Can we hit on 2 more real quick?
Let's keep it real.
Let's keep it real. Okay. Well, one of them was our horse, actually. And I've been wanting to show this one for at least a week now. Its name is Chromatic Publisher. Pulling it up. Let's see. Share my screen again.
This horse.
This horse, I could not believe how terrible it was.
This is the dud of all duds.
There we go. Chromatic Publisher. We had such high hopes for this horse. It came from Chromatic, who's one of our best 2.0 legendaries. Very solid mid from Chromatic, Theory, and and then our Z1 mid, the Publisher. And this horse is just, I mean, you see an 18% win rate. It's very deceiving because this horse is just, maybe there's more potential here. I mean, it's losing flames in class 3 in low stakes top 6s. There's it's not a lot of hope for this.
It's all about the expectations, right? Like this is a breed that you would think, I mean, that's like almost approaching like an ETH, right? If you breed this thing for 0.05, you're pumped with these results. But in terms of expectation versus reality, that was a bit of a dud.
Yeah, I think that was my next question. You know, if we were booking this breed, I think, around 1 ETH, even today with the market feeling, kind of cooled off and down. I mean, we've been studying Chromatic consistently around 0.35 ETH. So if you want to call it even, 10, 20% off for this market being cooler, and say we're studying it at 0.3, Publisher's been very successful in 2.0. So we're probably not giving that up for less than 0.6, 0.7. So 1 ETH. And this horse is, I guess there's some breeding value here. Maybe you're talking about dart throws. And the thing when you get a dud Nakamoto is that you're still having to pay that minimum, which is relatively high versus the other bloodlines, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might be a good test of that grandparent ratio you were talking about, because it's going to be very clear when it comes from one of the grandparents or when it comes from this one.
Yeah, I guess there's still hope because there's not a whole lot of other avenues to pull from. You're going to pull from something good if you get those grandparent genes. We'll have to breed it out, I guess.
For science.
Science, but not because I'm addicted. Okay, last one here, Kevin. The Snag. This one we sold for 0.8 ETH, and it's coming from Live and Free, one of our Z1s, and Limitation Penance. Z2 Legendary. We sold this horse for 0.8 ETH, and it's coming from Live and Free and Limitation Penance. So we've done this breed. I think this is the 4th time now, Kevin. The first 3 all turned out much better than this Snag horse. I think WWE SmackDown was the first time, and that one's very consistent tournament runner, at least back in the older meta when there was not so much segmentation going on. And then Butter Buns, we got a lot of butter horses, Butter Buns and Limitation Free with other 2. So they all look better than this. I'm curious, Kevin, do you think that this was just a really unfortunate role for this breed, or do you think that maybe competition is getting stiffer and that's why, like in Discovery, these well-bred horses are kind of beating up on a horse like this?
I think it's got to be about the floor, at least that we've seen in a sample size of 4. It's somewhat, competition is tough, but it is absolutely worse than those others, even without the competition. And I mean, it's also kind of bounced around a little bit in terms of distances. So you're not just looking at sprint stuff. I think 1,000, 1,200 would be the best. But yeah, absolutely a dud.
Yeah, I think that happened because, it came out of the gates and didn't flame in its first 2 races at 1,000, 1,200. So
that's where we would just park it.
Right. Yeah, it finds the bench pretty quick. So again, in this kind of market, we probably would book this horse for a little bit less, maybe 0.7 or something like that, just to kind of give transparency on where we feel the market is and how we're valuing things today. And there might be some breeding value in this, but I don't think we would be paying. This horse wouldn't have very much use in our stable anyway, even as a breeding asset, right?
No, and another thing is, like, we have this same like bloodline that we can build every month, and we have some like that. So in terms of like getting access to blood, sometimes you'll buy a horse that may not be as good on the track, but it gets you exposure to different bloodlines, especially when it's a legendary. And we've done this in the past, but this is one we bred in house. We wouldn't really want to keep it around.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, horses are not worth the same thing. There's certain horses that are worth a ton more in our stable versus other people's stables because of the options that we have to breed them out, and we're able to provide them and pair them with other horses to sell to people and provide to the community. So that's something that always needs to be kept in mind as context when you're thinking about buying or selling a horse, what your own situation is, like we always say, not financial advice. But I think we hit on everything this week, Kevin. A little bit of technical difficulties, but we got through it. And anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I'm good.
Well, follow Kevin out there on Twitter at Arbitrage Racing, no G. Follow me at ZED Diamond Hands. And follow our Arbitrage.Run account at Arbitrage.Run. Come find us at Arbitrage.Run. Send us a request, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Take care.